Hey guys, John here. In the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to cover with you the economics of buffets. How are buffets sustainable in light of economic theory? And how does this imply, maybe, that we should remove child labor laws, minimum age laws? Cool, so let's dive in. So in Econ 101, we hear about the scarcity principle. Scarcity principle says, hey, there's a limited supply of goods and there's like unlimited demand. And so this creates like an allocation problem, and that's kind of where our economic optimization comes in. The problem with a buffet is that it's a microcosm where there really isn't scarce demand. You can eat as much as you want. The other weird thing about a buffet is that even though you can eat as much as you want and the marginal cost is free, so like once you get in, you can just keep going. People stop at some point. So why would people stop consuming a free good? And there's a couple answers. One answer is they wouldn't. So on this view, food is no longer a good when the marginal utility is zero or negative. So this is really interesting. So this is the economics of how a good is context dependent. And what we might call a good, this hat or this shirt, what might be good for me, another person might pay to not wear, So I might pay money for this shirt. Someone might be so repulsed by the Silicon Valley TV show that they don't want a picture of Jared on their chest. And they would actually pay money to keep that shirt away from them. And we can imagine other hats that people would do the same for. So a good and a bad is context dependent. We can't refer to a single physical item and say that this is always a good or always a bad. So that's one point. Related to that is, so kind of how we said the utility is going down, marginal utility is going down. When I'm really hungry, I get a lot of benefit from eating. Then I'm less hungry. Finally, I'm kind of stuffed and I don't want to take another bite. And then if I am forced to take a bite, I'm actually going to like pay money to like have less food. So related to that is we can take away the good and the bad perspective and just talk about willingness to pay for utility. And so when the marginal utility goes down, my willingness to pay goes down. And my willingness to pay also eventually gets to zero or goes negative. So this is like backward bending demand, which is another really cool thing in economics. And this is going to tie over to education. Why would demand bend backward for food? Well, satiation, physical satiation is one reason. And another is like social pressures or dieting. So like maybe I'm out with my friends and I don't want to look like a hog, right? So even if I'm still hungry, I might stop eating. And same if I'm on a diet, if I'm restricting my calories. So in economics, this is the food bliss point. In economics, there's the idea of a bliss point, which is basically what we've just described. After you eat a certain amount, you don't want to eat anymore. So you can look at more into bliss points if you're interested in that, and you can also look in, they're also called satiation points. So the way this relates to education is employers want to pay a wage such that they're paying for the value add you give to a company, right? So if we're at McDonald's and people are flipping burgers, they want to hire me because I'm going to help them flip more burgers and add to their bottom line. I'm going to make them money. But consider the situation where I'm just not very good at my job. Maybe I'm like a terrible burger flipper. Why would an employer keep me at that point? On the face of it, you might say they wouldn't, you'll get fired, but that's actually not true. We have tons of situations where low-skilled people do sustain employment. And here's a few reasons why. One, the employer might have non-financial reasons to keep you around. For example, this would be an example of like an unpaid internship or like a charity event where them employing you or helping you is considered to be like a good according to society. And so they're getting a benefit from that in a non-financial way. Another kind of similar thing would be like, hey, if your dad owns the company, then the manager might have to put up with you for non-financial reasons that are kind of at a lower level than all of society, right? But similar idea that there's non-financial pressures. Two, even if your productivity is zero or negative, the employer may have reasons to think that that productivity will rapidly increase. And so that by keeping you around, they will eventually be making a return off of your labor. This is frequently the case during professional onboarding. Like even me, when I get a new job, For new employees in various industries, it's common to take 2 weeks to 3 months for an onboarding period where your productivity is near zero or negative before you become, or even positive, but not to the point to justify your wages. It's really common. And then 3, the employer might want to keep you around if they are paying you a negative wage. Another way of saying that is that you are paying them. Why would you pay your employer? Well, you would pay your employer to give you skills, training, experience, social networking. Hey, that kind of sounds like a university or a training program or an alternative learning program. And that's exactly what it is. So isn't it interesting that with a little economic thinking from how buffets work and translating over to wages and the labor market, we can see that negative wages are similar to an education system. We know that minimum wage laws, for example, have problems where they reduce the total social surplus. There's a deadweight loss in one way or another. Will frequently argue that it will reduce unemployment, but then people would say, hey, over here it didn't reduce unemployment. What they don't tell you is that there were negative growth effects, like employers didn't fire people, but they didn't hire people either. So there could be reduced employment, negative growth effects. There could be price effects, passing on more expensive prices so that you can keep hiring, passing on more expensive prices to a consumer. Or there's often a combination of these effects. Regardless, we know that it's going to reduce total social surplus, and it's kind of a bad thing overall. The negative wage being equivalent to training or education is interesting because it goes further, showing why minimum wage as well as minimum age, AGE, laws and also internship prohibitions end up hurting the people with the least skills, including those that are trying to get their first job, the most. It hurts these people the most. And isn't that interesting that these are the people that we're trying to protect with something like a internship prohibition? It's often justified that, hey, employers are taking advantage of these would-be workers. In reality, no. If it's a voluntary contract, then prohibiting it is just another case of deadweight loss similar to a minimum wage. And the same is true with minimum age. We can say, hey, these kids in high school are better off learning. But the fact is that some of the best learning happens on the job, including some of the most job market relevant skill making happens on the job, where higher education, you may not be getting so much skills. And what's the point of higher education anyway? The vast majority of people attend higher education for the purposes of attaining a job. So great, I hope this was interesting and educational. On the screen in front of you, you can see an article I wrote in 2018 for HackerNoon, the case for a programming exemption to child labor laws. In this article, I dive in deeper to the specific case of programming and why the origin of child labor laws around physically protecting children from like factory conditions doesn't apply to programming, where they can do that from the comfort of their own home, and they're often working on a computer from the comfort of their own home for schooling anyway. So why not let them get paid and acquire job relevant skills? So this article dives into that further. There's a link in the description. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, and talk to you later. If you like this video, obviously like and subscribe. There will also be in the description a link to an About Me page that has links to all my social. Feel free to get in